And the first civilizations in America were the Mesoamericans and the Andes. And the Mesoamericans and the Andes, they were separated. They didn't really talk to each other. They didn't really interact, although they were in a really small, rugged space surrounded by like forest. And it was separated from the Afro-Eurasia in the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, and altogether separate worlds, later known as the Mesoamericas and the Andes. Together they were a majority of the population of the Americas in the 1200s, but unlike the civilizations of Africa and Eurasia, Mesoamerica and the Andes, they had little but direct contact with each other. Like I said, they shared a rugged mountain terrain with an enormous range of microclimate, as well as great ecological and biological diversity, which means a whole bunch of like animals and like bushes and like stuff, you know? It was in a relatively small area. Such condition contributed in ethnical diversity by both 100 regions had witnessed the rise and decline of series of increasing lists surrounding like sophisticated surrounding states that were starting to form around them, and people were like trying to take their land. Anyways, both were of the world of previous margin people who had forcibly taken over and absorbed their culture, absorbing a new energy. Both were also dismantled in the 6th century, all the hands of Spanish conquistadors and their diseases. So these people who were migrating and taking their land brought over a whole bunch of new cultures and diseases, and the Amazon rainforest became somewhat deforested due to the rise of civilizations living in and around the rainforest. Numerous large and clay platforms were raised at the top. There were believed to have been numerous large clay platforms, like I said, but perhaps sometimes there were castles that were also being built around, mainly built out of wood and clay, because that was the main resources that they contributed to and that they had at hand. The concept of climbing up to places of religious significance also became a cultural theme of the pre-Columbian architecture. And they were coming in and they would talk and they would bring in their own culture from where they previously lived, and their religions where they previously lived, and they bring them together here in the Mesoamericas and the Incas.
The Incan Empire, which began around 1400 AD and stretched for more than 2,500 miles of the South American western coast, was one of the largest and most influential empires in South America. They began as a small tribe that often battled and fought with other tribes around them, but they soon moved to the Andes mountain range in Peru and founded a capital city named Cusco. The empire spread through much of South America, mainly deserts in modern-day Chile and rainforests in modern-day Brazil. They conquered nearby tribes and empires, majorly Chimu and Moche, and then adopted their technology and traditions into the empire, mostly by force. Machu Picchu, probably the most recognizable city from the empire, was built for some reason outside of the capital city of Cusco. The empire grew to modern-day Bolivia, Argentina, Chile, Ecuador, and Brazil. They built over 14,000 miles of road, which were used for commerce and economics, but only the upper class, notably the empire and his confidants, were only able to use them. One of the most innovative things that they built were canals that allowed the southern area of the empire, which was mainly desert, to have irrigation for their crops. The Incan Empire was most notably ruled by one emperor who had all power over all the citizens. It employed a caste system of the emperor, a high priest, a commander-in-chief, the middle class, which consisted of lords, which managed the Incan regions, and the bottom, which was workers and common people. The Incan Empire, weirdly enough, had no written language, but had much artistic skill. They combined customs from neighboring cities that they conquered into the empire, and they became notable throughout the empire. When the customs were combined, people who lived in the cities that were conquered were often forced to join the Incans, whether by choice or by force. When rulers died, they were mummified so they could be observed by many of the peoples of the empire. The fall of the Incan Empire was the result of the two sons of the recently deceased ruler, who both wanted power over the empire. It was in the middle of a war, and that caused many people to be distraught and caused turmoil throughout the empire. Thousands died in the war, and the Incan Empire was very vastly weakened. And due to smallpox, many people died due to disease. The King of Spain sent many of his people to conquer the Incan Empire and steal their riches. Most notably, Francisco Pizarro led the Spanish to the western coast, and he captured the leader and seized the city. He offered to trade the ruler for many riches, but he took the riches anyway and then killed the ruler. By the late 1500s, the Inca had lost most of the power in the region, and the Spanish were in control. The Incan Empire basically dissolved after that, only lasting 100 years. Even though it lasted 100 years, it was one of the most influential societies in South America. When many people talk about the Greeks, the Romans, or the Egyptians and their ties to religion, no one seems to mention the Incan religion, which is just as noteworthy as the other three. Religion, like the other three, was very integral to society and how society functioned. Many parts of the government used religion to enforce their rule and legitimize it. Many natural disasters also were the result of the gods, according to the Incan people, and they worshipped them to stop any earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. Shamans also played a big part in the religion. At one point, the capital Cusco was said to have over 475 of them. One shaman even was close to the emperor and advised him on many matters. The Incans said that the god named Viracocha created the world and the stars and the sun and the moon through Lake Titicaca. He at first created a race of giants and then did not like them, so he created another race which became the human race. Inti, the sun god of the Incans, was one of the most important figures in their religion. Inti was also the god of empire and conquest. The Incan ruler was considered a living descendant of Inti. He was considered a very divine figure in their culture. A gold statue of the god was kept at the Temple of the Sun at a sacred complex in Cusco. With many jewels and gold on his statue, he was seen as a very important figure in the temple. The organs and remains of every Incan ruler who died was put at the foot of the statue to be burned. Besides Inti, there were many other important gods in the Incan religion. One was Mama Kila, the god of the moon. She was important because she governed the ceremonial calendar. Another important god in the religion was Viracocha, the creator god who created the universe. Another one was Ilapa, the god of thunder. Both of those had their own temples in the sacred complex in Cusco, along with Mama Kila. Two other notable gods were Quixo, the god of rainbows, and the personification of Venus in the Incan religion. The Incans worshipped their gods through many temples and sacred sites. Offerings, prayers, and ceremonies were held at these sites. Priests, who often served different gods, held these different ceremonies. Often, sacrifices were made for the gods so that they didn't have natural disasters happen, or so that the Incans won their war.
Hi, my name is Peyton. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Olmec civilization and its importance to Mesoamerica in its early stages. Formed in ancient Mexico around what we now call Tabasco and Veracruz, the Olmec civilization lasted from about 1200 BCE to 400 BCE. So basically, the Olmec civilization influenced the creation of most Mesoamerican cities, like the Aztecs. No big deal, right? The Olmecs were very smart and decided they should trade their goods with other civilizations. They managed to be able to trade goods with places as far away as modern-day Nicaragua, which is around 1,469 kilometers or 913 miles away. Wow, and to think I can barely even send my grandma a letter without modern-day technology. Now, something that surprises me about the Olmecs is that they're oddly modern. Archaeologists have found proof that they played some kind of ball game. That reminds me of my first baseball game. I was wondering why the ball kept getting closer, then it hit me. Fun times. Other things the Olmecs are known for were their stone sculptures, their animal gods, and their idea to drink chocolate. Man, I could really go for some hot chocolate right now. And we're back. Now, these practices in Olmec culture were passed down by the people who followed this Mesoamerican civilization. Maybe Clay Thompson can take some notes on how to pass things. Have him at the basketball every once in a while, Clay. So you see, the name Olmec is an Aztec name which means rubber people. How did they come up with that one? And actually, nobody really knows. Due to lack of archaeological evidence, we don't really know the Olmec's ethnicity or really where a majority of their smaller settlements were located. Now, speaking of rubber, we were told that we were supposed to wear masks and rubber gloves to the stores to keep us safe, right? Boy, did my dad feel dumb when he walked into the store and saw that you had to wear more than just a mask and rubber gloves. Moving on. It is believed that the Olmecs had an organized religion. This is debated, though, as they had records of their practices written through symbols that we still do not completely understand. However, we do know that the Olmecs practiced sacrifice, cave rituals, they built pyramids, and they had an odd obsession with mirrors. That's right, mirrors. I don't blame them, though. In a world without Facetune, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Megan Fox, I would never stop looking in a mirror either. Initially, the prosperity of the Olmec civilization was dependent on the well-watered soil in the Gulf of Mexico. There they grew corns and beans, which supported their agriculture. Just like my dad's bale, prosperity in the city of San Lorenzo started around 1200. Because of its position, there was no risk of floods, and they were able to easily control the local trade. Popular trade items were obsidian, jade, mica, rubber, pottery, feathers, and mirrors, which were actually commonly made out of polished magnetite. Unfortunately, around 900 BCE, San Lorenzo started to fall. It's not all bad news, though. In the midst of San Lorenzo's systematic destruction, the city of La Venta started to thrive. It eventually became a capital and housed around 18,000 people. San Lorenzo, in the midst of its crisis, decided, hey, there's no time like the present to build a pyramid with La Venta and Lagos de los Cerros, and that's exactly what they did. Soon, La Venta started to suffer from systematic and deliberate destruction of its monuments. It was estimated that this was happening around 400-300 BCE. Now, on to religion. Normally I find talking about religion kind of boring, but the Olmecs had some very interesting beliefs in gods. Archaeologists think that the Olmecs believed that natural places were connected to the sky, earth, and the underworld. They believed that caves could lead you to the underworld, and mountains that had both springs and caves allowed you to access all three planes. And while I do not know the name of the Olmec gods, we do know that they are represented by the rain, earth, and maize. That's not the right kind of maize. I meant corn. Caitlin, corn. The Olmecs recognized animals at the top of the food chain as powerful rulers that could transform themselves into fearsome creatures. It was also common for them to mix creatures together and create new exotic ones. A popular creature was the were-jaguar, a mix between a human and a jaguar. I wonder if it was the same thing as werewolves with the whole full moon thing. The Olmecs were also worshipped a sky dragon and 4 dwarves that held up the sky. Man, I really hope Grumpy wasn't one of them. Make him mad once and the whole sky would come crashing down. Since we're all alive, I'm guessing that hasn't happened. Yet. Haha. So, overall, the Olmecs influenced many Mesoamerican civilizations. They helped form some of the most important cities in South America and introduced interesting beliefs to the world. I think that without the Olmecs, civilization in Mesoamerica would not have been as successful, and life would have been very different. This is Peyton, signing off.
The last and largest empire of Mesoamerica was the Aztec Empire. They had a population of 5 to 6 million people and were loosely structured and unstable. They were also more dependent on the priests and rulers of the society. They also faced many rebellions. The people in cities were required to provide labor for the Aztec projects and regularly deliver to the Aztec rulers impressive qualities of textiles, clothing, military supplies, jewelry, and other luxuries, various food, animal products, building materials, and much more. The city also featured many camels, dikes, causeways, and bridges. Slaves played a predominant role in Aztec society and were used for labor and sometimes bloody sacrifice rituals. These sacrifices displayed great wealth, which impressed enemies, allies, and subjects. The Aztec warfare goal was to prison the enemy rather than killing. In the end, this influenced other civilizations and many other empires after the collapse.